Well, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for this month's edition of the Drone Responders Innovation Series. This is where we highlight emerging technologies, innovative solutions, and industry leaders who are helping advance the use of unmanned aircraft, counter-UAS technologies, and advanced air mobility in public safety. I'm Jason Day. I'm the Deputy Director of Drone Responders, and I'll be your host today. Charles is unfortunately unable to join us, but should be back for next month's webinar. Before we get started, a few housekeeping items. Please use the Q&A feature throughout the webinar to submit your questions for today's presenters. We ask that all your questions remain professional, respectful, and appropriate for public consumption. A link to today's presentation will be shared in the chat at the conclusion of the webinar, and the recording will be on the Drone Responders YouTube channel. We'll also provide contact information for our presenters should you wish to follow up with them directly after the webinar. But today we're extremely excited, excuse me, to feature BRINC, a company that continues to push boundaries of drone technology with purpose-built solutions designed specifically to support first responders and public safety agencies. BRINC's commitment to innovation, operational excellence, and mission-focused technology has made them a trusted partner for agencies across the entire country. It's my pleasure to introduce our presenters for today's session, David Benowitz and Don Redmond. David serves as Vice President of Strategy at BRINC and has been a leading voice in the public safety drone community. He's helped agencies develop and scale successful UAS programs. Joining him is Don Redmond, the Vice President of DFR, whose extensive experience and expertise brings valuable perspective on the operational capabilities and real-world applications of BRINC's technology. David and Don will share insights into BRINC's latest innovations, discuss how their solutions are supporting those public safety missions, and explore what's ahead for the future of responder-focused drone technology. Gentlemen, we are very grateful to have both of you with us today. So David and Don, again, thank you for joining the Drone Responders Innovation Series. The floor is yours, and we look forward to your conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jason, for having us on, and honestly for the work that you, Charles, and the rest of the Drone Responders team does for the entire industry. It's been great to kind of see this organization from its infancy to where it's at today, with how many members it is and the influence it really does have, and standardizing operations and driving the needle forward. What we're going to run through for you guys today is a few different updates within BRINC, but we also want this to be your time as well. So if there are any questions you want to know as we kind of run through this content, or really anything else as well, this is really a great time to do it. We want to be as transparent as possible as well. We know, the Drone Responders crew in general tends to be a lot more aware of everything out in the field. So some of this could be a little bit of a refresher for you guys, but feel free to jump in with any type of questions that you want to get answered in the Q&A or in the chat box there as well. So first off is just a few more kind of high level updates about BRINC. As of today, and kind of happy to announce more recently, we kind of tipped over 1,000 agencies in all 50 states have chosen BRINC. So we've really seen a big uptick in our deployments, and that kind of drives through, one, our focus in public safety and kind of ramping up our production here in Seattle, Washington, actually the building I'm in right now. And also, even more recently, we've announced a updated fundraise from Motorola Solutions that will help us scale product development and build out our HQ2 here in Seattle, and really also help out ramping up installations of DFR systems, but also products for public safety kind of across the board. So really excited for that. There's obviously also a bunch of integrations this will enable us kind of part of that too, but really excited to kind of share that news with you guys all too. And then we've also really seen great adoption from a lot of our agency customers over the past year plus that we've had BRINC DFR in the field, but obviously we've seen with the early days with Lemur 2 and whatnot too, a ton of great SWAT applications. And now we're seeing that really have an impact across fire and police and even now EMS too. So here's a few ones. I think a lot of the ones that I'll kind of call out here are how people are kind of approaching DFR differently. But actually, Don, do you want to walk through a few that kind of make you excited?
Yeah, so, where we're seeing it is the agencies are using it on a whole, it's not just a high risk calls for service. They're using it on kind of the community aspect ones. So they're doing vacation checks. They're doing, they're responding to water main breaks. They're responding to fire call outs, different things like that. So they're really showing DFR the value of it to not just public safety being police departments, but for the community in general. So I think the agencies who I'm seeing across the country who have been very successful are really showing how DFR doesn't necessarily just benefit the police department, it benefits all of the community and different aspects of it. So part of that, the perfect example, the integrations that we had with Pueblo Police Department. They just did a release with ShotSpotter where the drone arrived so quickly that the shell casings were in the street still hot enough that they could see them still in the streets. So they're showing the value of how quickly the drone's getting out there ahead of time.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that ShotSpotter integration and the Pueblo story in particular, I mean, they had data they published about roughly nearly 80% of all gunshots detected before they weren't able to send an officer or a team out to go check what actually happened. With drones, that's really changed the game. So now they can start deploying this to, gunshots even before they're verified, getting out there, and it really changes how this technology works for them. It becomes a lot more useful and valuable because they have DFR. DFR becomes not just an efficiency enabler and scaler, force multiplier of their team and their manpower, but also other systems that they have across their agency. Also call it Taylor here, I think is really cool as well. Like, I think, we've seen a lot of agencies develop DFR. What they've also done in DFR and with their DFR program in particular is really kind of focus it not just around, hey, we're going to calls for service, but also more planned incidents too, where, hey, we're covering this area with DFR. We're going to do a child predator sting. Let's get that out. Let's get that coverage there from a DFR perspective instead of a traditional kind of drone deployment there too. So we're starting to see a lot more interesting ways to kind of approach this as well. I'll call out one other agency we've seen do really cool operations, which is Schenectady PD, where they've really been covering, they have really strong coverage of their city with their DFR docks. So they have a ton of extra capacity that they're deploying to priority 2, priority 3 calls. And then if a priority 1 call comes up, they're actually redeploying there too. So we'll kind of talk through how we've enabled them to go about that a little bit more easily, but I think that's really changed the game for them and just how many calls they can cover as an agency overall, where they have to allocate those manpower and those resources, and also how they kind of really handle real-time response more broadly. Common best. This is a quote I like from Taylor, Michigan PD, which is, we always deploy the responders because of the loiter time. We're able to cover all entrances and be ahead of the game. I mean, this was in particular to how they've focused on child predator stings, but I think also really touches into what differentiates us versus I think a lot of other systems out there is we do have a really great flight time, really great time on scene. And that is kind of a big enabler for a lot of our agency partners.
Hey, David, can you just briefly talk about how our batteries are built and how they're a little bit different than kind of the standard that's out there?
Yeah. So, if you look at, really any other drone vendor out there, they're kind of working with a contract manufacturer to purchase what's called pouch cells. So they kind of get them particularly made, they're outsourced completely, and they kind of get produced in large volumes, but they lock in the chemistry and they tend to be inherently a little bit less safe and a little bit less efficient. Instead of doing that, we actually internally purchase just the cylindrical cells. So they're the same cells an EV maker would purchase when they're building out their EV batteries for their vehicles, like a Tesla or a Hyundai or a Rivian as well. And we handle the full assembly of that from that individual cylindrical cell. So anything happens on the supply chain side, we can quickly move to another vendor. Or if something upgrades in the field, like we've had this with Lemur 2 before, where we started with kind of the at the time present gen cylindrical cells, we've actually upgraded in the field. So any customers that are getting replacement batteries are just getting a little bit more flight time. It's not 10 minutes, but they get at least 2 more minutes of flight time over the life of that product because we're just upgrading those cylindrical cells continuously. These cylindrical cells are also a bit safer. They handle temperature a lot better. They handle punctures a lot better too. And really lets us kind of scale up a bit faster with how we kind of manufacture things. Yeah. Cool. Yeah, we'll hop into a few different updates that I think, maybe you guys have seen BRINC or BRINC DFR to some degree, but, we've constantly been pushing updates just to respond to our agency partners and respond to their feedback. So we want to run through a few of those updates here. So kind of the first is just a few different changes to how we've kind of handled live ops and what that looks like today. So what you're seeing here is the screen recording. The video might come through a little choppy depending on your internet connectivity. I'll share a link at the end of this of this presentation so you guys can actually consume it on your own time too. But we focus on really enabling faster launches to have full airspace contacts, and then also are handling auto routing as well. So you're kind of seeing that on the screen right now, and you'll kind of see why there's a little crooked arrow there on the right when I pull up those geofences in this too. It's going to see me pull up the layer of the geofence, and we'll see it routing around just some construction that's in the middle that has cranes from time to time, and kind of routing around that to get to that call for service. But this is really what BRINC DFR looks like. We're ingesting calls for service through different CAD systems. There's no kind of vendor lock in there. We'll work with any CAD that you're working with. We'll pull in that call for service, you hit deploy, and we kind of run through that full checklist, and then you're good to go. Don, anything you want to add there?
Yeah, I mean, the critical aspect of it, well, 2 points. Yes, the CAD is extremely important. So we really feel like that CAD integration is a critical aspect of all DFR operations. So having that call for service automatically populate within the software itself and to be able to deploy to that is really critical. And we can even take it a step further if you've got your 911 system, whether it's a rapid deploy or Vesta 911 call system. It doesn't pull in the nature of it, but if you want to just get a 911 call even quicker before dispatch enters it into CAD, that's a possibility also, so that we can do that even quicker for you. And then, the aspect of now we have the flight path that will automatically go around the geofence is critical. So you don't have to worry about the drone coming up to a geofence and just stopping and hovering there. It'll route itself around it. But even just as important is if you hit return to home, it also will reroute itself around that hazard also. So it's just another layer of safety that you don't have to worry about with our DFR platform.
Yep. And we've also really focused on making operations as simple as possible with kind of BRINC DFR. So what you're seeing here on the right is what we call an approach mission, where you just have to drop a pin on a building and the drone will and then where you want the drone to be, and then it'll position itself in the camera to focus on that subject. And that's kind of what you're seeing happen there as it kind of angles down. There's no manual entry besides those 2 clicks to choose where I'm looking, where the drone's going, and confirming. Everything else is kind of handled by that system itself. And so I really think that kind of shows one, like, it gives you a lot of flexibility in a lot of situations where, let's say we have a structure fire and we want to cover the other side. Instead of having to manually fly around there and kind of navigate around it, I can very simply kind of navigate, focus on comms, focus on anything other than the flight, and then kind of come back to it as the drone's repositioned. This also ties into how we do orbiting as well. So I'll kind of show you a little bit of this too. So you'll see it's as simple as hitting right click, orbit, and then choosing how wide that circle is. And then the drone will kind of configure itself in an orbit position. So kind of, once again, if we're in a SWAT call out where we're just kind of providing that situational awareness and we don't know which side of this building is hot, where these suspects might escape, I might just orbit that area and just keep an eye on that scene and really track it with the thermal, with that visual side by side, and have that kind of full kind of reference context. Obviously, structure fires are also going to be pretty big for this. Yeah.
So David, there was a question. Mm-hmm. How does it handle unrestricted airspace identifying incoming aircraft? Yeah,
this is actually great. And actually, where we're flying, I don't think on this screen record we have it, but we always get seaplanes near our office where we're flying this aircraft here. In this screen recording. We have ADS-B in on our station and our controllers and in our overall system. So we're pulling that in too. And so that'll give us alerts. So we'll know, hey, this is where we're able to operate and where we can operate, where we're geofenced in, or maybe where we're kind of going beyond that. And we'll get alerts as aircraft come near, yellow, red, green, depending on their kind of time there. You actually see there where you see calls on the right, there's a separate tab there called airspace where you'll kind of see those kind of pop up and populate. We do also integrate with other people who do counter-UAS systems. So there's like a few different options there, but we do plug in those where we read from an API, those kind of like unwarranted drones, for example, that might be in that airspace too. So ADS-B in plus integrations to pull in all that information.
Yep. So along those lines, numerous customers are, in fact, I think most all of our DFR customers are flying under shielded operations. So we do have as David said, ADS-B in. We have an ASTM Cat 3 approved parachute on there, and then the anti-collision lights, which are the 3 requirements for shielded operations.
Yeah.
Would you pause here real quick just for the audience and explain what shielded operations are?
Yeah.
I'm happy to do it. So it's a lot of it has to do with what drone responders has to do. Really was a huge push for this. The idea of the infrastructure companies being able to originally fly drones to check power lines and bridges and everything, and they wanted to fly with no visual observers. And so as we looked at this as an industry, the idea of couldn't we fly up to 200 feet and all we need is, and I don't want to say all we need, this is kind of working with the FAA, and it's not BRINC, this is as an industry whole, being able to go to scale with DFR operations. Writing a ConOps was taken anywhere from 6 to 9 months for an agency to do it. And we just wanted a way for agencies to go to scale for DFR without visual observers and without radar. So what ultimately shielded operations landed on, no pun intended, was agencies could get up to 200 feet if that is their ceiling now. Meaning if you only have a ceiling of about 100 feet, then you don't automatically get the 200 feet. You have to address that. But ADS-BN, so you're pulling in, you're ingesting the information from manned aircraft, 3-mile collision, anti-collision lights, and an ASTM approved parachute. David, am I missing anything on that?
No, yeah, and I just wanted to pull this up to kind of, we'll keep it a little bit more dynamic. But yeah, we do also integrate with radar for those that want to go for that 400 feet outside of the shielded operations kind of envelope there. And then we have also helped agencies work through, if there are zero grids in the area where an airport kind of covers that, working still within that shielded operations framework where we don't require radar to work with the ATC to get back some of those zero grids too. So not flying directly over the airport, but at least a bit closer where traditional civilian drones could not be operational.
Yeah, we as an industry have been very fortunate in getting DFR operations pretty much everywhere in the United States in some form or another. So if you have difficult airspace, don't let that be a distractor. It just may be a little more difficult, but we're seeing that success throughout the country.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that goes off honestly to drone responders. Like I'm not just saying that, like that's actually true. And obviously the FAA too for kind of really stepping up and making this a much more streamlined process. I'll also kind of show this too, this is live ops live, live ops, but just to kind of show a little bit of how that operates. So I can pull up my radar information here, my ADS-B information here as another tab. And then, we're kind of seeing this live. I haven't filtered it, but if I want to just only see critical things, I'm going to click that and then kind of start to see, what's interesting or what's at that lower level there too. So this we'll filter things too far away from you. We have like a big airport nearby us. We tend to fly up here in that green area, but we have lovely seaplanes taking off from here every day, all day. It's cloudy today, so not as much today though. Oh, well, just as I say that, they're about to take off there. That kind of gives you an idea of how that works from an operations level. You'll get notifications while you're piloting, but also before you're piloting too, we'll deliver that kind of alert to you. Cool. Yeah, hopping back into this though, we've also really focused on enabling, different ways to operate with the drone. So click or mouse capture mode. So mouse capture where it's kind of following you if you use trackpads or if you use I forgot what they're called, the mouses with the big ball. Makes it a lot more seamless for you to do kind of nuanced zooming. Or as you kind of see here, I'm just clicking around and it's kind of following my mouse. And then lastly, of course, is game controller support is a big ad that we've kind of focused on in beta with some of our users there. And then it'll be pushed out to everyone else kind of across the nation. And then, there's another big element, which is evidence storage. And, this is really working as seamless as possible. So it'll integrate with evidence.com. It'll integrate with Command Central DEMS or any other kind of DEMS product that you're kind of using there as well. But we like to associate, if you have a CAD call, I'll do this automatically, associate each call with a case ID, and then find that case ID in the evidence management system and then integrate those two. So what you're seeing here on the screen share is just what happens after you land a DFR mission. We're going to have a standard form. The call types are kind of custom per agency. And then we'll log that information just so we're tracking, hey, how is this DFR program going? Is it working? We'll send that to your transparency dashboard and get that all updated. And then also it'll be as part of your evidence layer storage in our CGS compliant vaults, or kind of sent off to your DEMS products. So it's kind of a look at what that looks like post of mission. I think what I'll also kind of call out, and this kind of really started from Schenectady and some of our other early agency partners of, hey, we're covering so many flights with DFR, so many lower priority calls is what we're launching to immediately, and then we're rerouting midway. We're saying, hey, we're going to go to this priority one. So we're seeing here at the end here is just us associating 2 different case IDs to the same flight. So many missions to one flight, and there's actually no limit to this. So it could be 3, 4, 5, 6. So we're saying, hey, look, this section of that flight is associated with this case ID. It'll then, as it finds those case IDs in your evidence.com platform, chop that video up and send only that slice of it to that CAD call. So you kind of have all of your evidence tied to those calls instead of being tied to the flights, which is, I think, a big thing the industry's kind of missed until now, which is, you guys are flying for purposes, for missions. Each flight is to us very important as a manufacturer of drones. But to you guys, we want to abstract that away a little bit when it comes down to how you store evidence and kind of mission data.
Yeah, and just to add a little bit on the transparency portal. So, David went through that and showed the how quickly it is. It's, as he said, it's very customizable. So what most agencies are doing, and this is something that is really been accepted or pushed by the ACLU and a lot of any of your community activists, of how do we show that you're flying drones that is appropriate for our community. When the drone lands, it starts uploading. Your pilot is able to just quickly, first on scene, assisted in an arrest. It's pulling in some information from the CAD, so that CAD integration is important. And then the following day, it gets uploaded into the dashboard that you see here. And you can totally customize it at whether you want to show the flights or not. But it's something that, if you haven't thought about a dashboard for your DFR program, highly recommend it. And it could also, if you want it to be used for your flights in general, for your patrol deployed flights also. Yeah.
So you're kind of seeing that too. And it's going to double down on, I think, what Don mentioned before is, hey, a day later, we don't want to be showing crimes in progress necessarily. So it is 24-hour backlog. So it'll kind of just update as that kind of 24-hour period kind of disappears. So we'll see, we're only seeing stuff from July 27th, it's July 28th. I have to check, sometimes I forget the day. And then we'll start to see tomorrow things on July 28th here. Cool. We'll hop on from there. And kind of the last one, the last bigger update I want to focus on is actually maybe the biggest one, which is, I think many people in the industry aren't necessarily aware that we do offer free integration. So anything that'll make your DFR program or really your drone program successful, we're willing to integrate for free of charge on our end. Some CAD providers are like, hey, we're going to charge XYZ for that to do it on their end. But that's not our policy. We'll do the integration for free. We'll also develop new integrations for free as well, as long as it's going to make you successful kind of for your DFR program. We're seeing here on the right is just, from within LiveOps, and I'll even show you kind of where that is. But that's just like what integrations can be super easily configured in that software. It's as simple as kind of putting in your API keys and kind of getting that running. There's more than this actually available and kind of already in market. So you get in touch with a BRINC rep or kind of either myself or Don. We kind of walk you through what's available there. I think some stuff missing, and there's a few different UTM systems that we're working with, a few more CAD systems, a few more on the EMS side or the DEM side of things, and then kind of all that too. And then we also have been working on how you can configure agency sharing within your organization. We're now seeing a lot of agencies where, they might cover a county and they have BRINC DFR, and then a city nearby is also on BRINC DFR. And they want to have a way that they can seamlessly share that without generating one-time share links or like logging into multiple accounts and like hopping between accounts and hoping they didn't forget their password. Don, I'm looking at you. And so this is something we've been enabling now, which is you can basically configure different organizations so they can access your drones and see your drones from within their account just as a separate team. So the goal right now isn't to like share piloting, but that's something we could do if we see more requests for that. But the ability to share kind of video feeds and streams and telemetry of your partner agency drones, you can see them all on that same map, all in that same airspace we're seeing, and see their kind of calls, see what they're doing as well. So if you are responding to a larger incident, let's say hopefully not, but a mass casualty event, or thinking a large wildfire event, where we're pulling in multiple different partners and agencies to kind of respond to that, or a mutual aid deployment, that gives you a lot of flexibility for how you can kind of approach it without having to like create accounts during an emergency, which is definitely the worst thing to do.
I'm gonna jump in here real quick with a question, because
go ahead,
integrations is one of the things I've always been really fascinated with. Are y'all working with any companies or directly with any agencies for TAC integration?
I think we are talking to a few agencies that are requesting it. We're totally able to configure a TAC server integration. I mean, there's different levels of kind of TAC integrations, right? So we're very open to working with anyone. And if you're using BRINC, it could even be in a non-DFR environment, and you have a TAC server set up and you want to be streaming that, that's actually something you can configure today. But we can help you through that. We don't want you to just do it on your own. It's sometimes requires a little bit of just knowledge of like what's the right feed. But yeah, we can actually work with any type of video provider and video receiver of RSTSP stream feeds to kind of get that done. But we can do something a little bit more bespoke too. So yeah, if you're an agency considering BRINC or already using BRINC and you want that TAC integration, let me know in particular. We'll kind of really get that prioritized.
Fantastic. Kind of along those same lines, and you said one of my favorite acronyms. What are your thoughts on public safety prioritization in the UTM ecosystem, and what is BRINC's vision on how to present that to the operator so that they can see this visualization of the airspace to include all the delivery drones?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a really, really interesting question. And I think with kind of like 108 coming down the road, it's something we're all going to have to address and kind of work through as well. Our kind of stance on this is kind of exactly what you're kind of implying here, which is, public safety should have dedicated priority in those instances. And, a package delivery drone should be kind of routing around that as well. We've been working with a few of the different kind of providers there, and also kind of chatting with Zipline too about how that'll work out. On our end, we want to be populating this drone is orange or red depending on where it's heading, and we're showing its trajectory, and we're also showing how it should be routing around you, or how you might need a route around what's happening there as well. So we actually have a few mock-ups in like the design stage, but since 108 isn't out yet, it's not really live as a need. But I know Ohio in particular, I think there's 8 agencies in Ohio that have gone DFR. About 5 of them are flying BRINC. And that's a big requirement, and they're going to be some of the first agencies to really help us figure this out as an industry and as a whole. But yeah, so we've been engaged in conversations. I think from like the UI or user experience layer there, we have ideas, but I don't think they're final yet. I think a little bit it's going to be we have an idea. These early agencies will really test it out and tell us if it looks good or not, and then we'll adapt.
Yeah, and just to kind of piggyback off that,
y'all will be at our at the Drone Responders Ohio Public Safety UAS conference in September, and it would be great to kind of see some of that early development.
Oh, for sure, yeah. Yeah, it's been working for a few months now, so we can get that. I'll chat with our team that'll be there.
Excellent.
Don, are you going to be there?
And, I'm not sure. I'll check my calendar. Yeah. But to kind of talk about the configure agency sharing, what we're also seeing across the country, and if you haven't thought about this, there's a lot of agencies that want DFR, but they don't have the manpower or the size to do this. We've just signed a couple of regional agencies where actually the dispatch center, the PSAP, has been the one who has, one agency, one PSAP dispatch center dispatches for 9 agencies, another one 19 agencies. And so they're the holder of the contract, but within that, they're putting DFR locations throughout those agencies as a regional asset controlled by the PSAP. So we're configuring so that they're sharing with that. And as David said, we could do teams and how that's going to roll out. So agencies across the country are being very creative on how they're rolling out DFR. So you don't have to be a large or medium-sized agency. We're seeing some very small agencies get DFR also, just kind of working with their regional PSAP or neighboring agencies. We've also seen mutual agencies, 2 agencies or 3 agencies working together for 1 or 2 launch locations.
Yeah. Then I did kind of see this note about Okanagan County and how these rural districts really need help on response times. I 100% agree with you there. And I'll kind of flip a little bit ahead to this too, which is what really gets me excited about drone use in rural. And I think what the next step is. Today the system's, I think, available from us and other vendors. Sorry, the audio's playing. I'm going to pause it. What we see a lot is, these drones have limited time on scene, limited speed, and also limited connectivity. So, we're getting about 3-mile response ranges. Yes, you can push it further. It depends on connectivity. But that's kind of where I think a lot of current systems are limited. We're really excited about Guardian, which will be our next gen bird. And this is just a video of it shattering our 60-mile-per-hour top speed. It hit about 65 mile per hour there, and we think we can get a little bit more juice out of it. But not only is it faster in a bigger battery to get about 60 minutes of flight time, but we're also introducing Starlink on board as well. And so I think when you're looking at it from a rural response level, it gives you a lot more options from a connectivity standpoint to kind of push further than you can with drones today that are just using cellular modems, because cellular modems are great, but they're great in cities, they're great in suburbs, they're not great in more rural communities.
Or over water, where we're seeing a lot of agencies,
Yeah.
a lot of public safety agencies wanting to, if you've got any body of water, especially with boating during holidays, and you've got somebody overboard or an issue with the boats, being able to fly a drone over the water and not have to worry about connectivity is huge.
Yep. Perfect. And then I'll kind of hit on another thing that we've been exploring and kind of been rolling out as well to a lot of our customers, has been support for hazmat sensors. So, what you're seeing here is our Lemur 2 drone, which is our indoor drone, but this also works on our responder drone, and then Guardian will have, a lot more capacity there as well. But we have support for common Draeger, MSI, and Blackline options. You're seeing here is like a soft mount. We also do rigid mounts as well for those kind of different systems. What's really cool about a lot of them too is a lot of them now have connectivity on their own. So you can get that feedback at real time. Drop it in, go send it inside, drop it inside, and you're going to read that data from a safe place. But something that's really, I think, enabling for net new applications in hazmat, where people have done this before, but I think it's been a lot more ad hoc or kind of harder to kind of do. If you guys are looking at this, let us know. We have a whole compatibility chart we can kind of send your way and let you know kind of what works and what doesn't.
And really, that's the value. One of the strong values with BRINC is, since we only build for public safety, we understand that the challenges. So as those devices or those widgets come online, that you feel like this would be a good idea to have this attached to a drone, we're able to configure the drones, hopefully, and get that payload on there, especially with Guardian coming online that has a much larger payload for them. So continue to, if there's something that you think you could use, feel free to reach out to us, and we could talk about configuration onto our drones.
For sure. Yeah, got a question about what about medical payloads, AED, naloxone, EpiPens. Don, do you want to answer that while I see if I have some mounts around here?
Yeah, it's interesting. At my agency, when I was doing DFR, I met Blake, and Blake Resnick, he started talking about how he wants drones to deliver payloads, right? Medical payloads. And I was thinking, like, okay, police departments, we're not going to be delivering, transplants. We're not going to be delivering stuff I really didn't understand. But really, the key is delivering life-saving payloads to people in need. So to answer your question, yes. So we are partners with ResTube. So we have an attachment that will attach to the responder. Some agencies just leave it attached to the responder if they're by a body of water where they know they're going to have to at some point leave it deployed. And so it'll be deployed as soon as it releases, it hits the water and opens up. We have canned messages for the communications aspects that, this is a flotation device, grab onto it. We have help coming on its way. So there's the rest tube and we're looking at developing one for the Guardian that has multiple flotation devices on there. So it isn't kind of a one and done. So you can, if it's a boat, overturned boat or something, you can deliver, full flotation devices to them. But the idea of having it's unfortunately we're at a time where we're seeing the fentanyl crisis that's happening in the United States. So some of our customers are actually, they leave Narcan on their drone at all times. It's so light, it doesn't take up any time on the drone, the battery on there. And I always say, you deliver one Narcan and you get a video of saving somebody's life, the community is going to want you to have more drones. So you deliver the Narcan, it's a canned message that's already preloaded on the drone. It just says, this is a nasal spray, put it up to the victim's nose. You don't have to prep it, squeeze, press it once, helps on the way, stand by. If you need to deploy, there's a second one, and it just kind of walks the person through them. So EpiPens we're able to do. AEDs are, we do have an AED that's obviously the hardest one for us to deliver. We do have one that it can deliver. It just chews up a lot of your battery life. David, did you have something?
Yeah, I'll kind of walk through it a little bit. Yeah, this is the holder for the Vive AED. Our pretty one is upstairs on where we do all of our prototypes. So I have our prototype one. But yeah, we can carry an Vive AED, which is the America's only approved AED that's like of a smaller form factor on Responder. On Guardian, though, we don't have that limitation. So this is kind of an idea of a Striker AED that we've been flying with Guardian, and actually the mount for it, early one as well. But yeah, this will just hook up onto the drone, and yeah, this still, it's heavy, but for Guardian, it's not a significant flight kind of penalty there too.
And the idea for obviously the rest tube, you can drop that into the water and not worry about it. And even the Narcan, you can drop it, at 10 feet off the ground. It's not going to hurt it. With the AED, probably you need to land it and release it and then take off again or not. So those are just different training aspects that we would work with the agency on.
Yeah. And then kind of maybe last thing here too is, we for Guardian are working on a robotic payload swapping station. And so that'll also change the game. I think nowadays with, all drones, you have to kind of manually go and mount it onto the drone. So from a DFR aspect, it's great you have it ready to go in a box, but you have to kind of still go up and mount it. So things like Narcan you can leave on there, but things like AED you don't want it because you're going to take a huge flight time penalty. So with Guardian, we'll be able to actually load it into the drone as it's kind of getting ready to take off, loading in a battery there too. So kind of take a look at that. If you actually want to come see it, come to Seattle. We'll kind of be taking it on a road show later in this year and kind of early next year. But if you want to kind of come see that as it's being built, I mean, it's really fun to see. Yeah, so Josh asked a really good question. And we've actually gotten this before. And I think it's something the team's kind of looking into. But, what he kind of put out is, Starlink really changes the game, but can we broadcast that Starlink connectivity to responders in the area so they can access that as well? So, this is actually something we can do. Like we have a Wi-Fi chip on the drone with its own separate radio and an antenna system that we could not just receive signals, but also emit signals back through that Starlink. And we're thinking we will eventually enable that. It's something we have to just do on the software side of things. There are going to be like, significant operational challenges to that, right? That means the drone's flying near you, not far away. So you still get that kind of like Wi-Fi access and kind of pull in there too. And it kind of ties you there. So, we can do it. I think there's always still value to like having Starlinks on your vehicles or wherever you're kind of operating from your operations center. It doesn't replace that. Like, I don't want to say it completely replaces that, but it does give you some extra connectivity in a pinch. We'll see kind of less performance on the streaming side. If Starlink is your only connectivity system that you're able to reach in a rural area, and you're also using it for this feature, you would have like, more dropouts in your live stream, like drops in connectivity or spikes in frames. But this is something that, yeah, we've talked about internally and we can do, and we'll eventually enable it on the software side. But just note those those limitations. I don't want to say like, hey, Guardian's giving internet for everyone everywhere, no matter where you are, for an unlimited period of time. No, there'll be operational limitations, but it'll give you nice internet activity access in a pinch.
Can I ask a little bit of an inside baseball question, and it's a pretty nerdy question, but can you talk through the process, if you even know what those conversations initially were with Starlink? I'm sure their team were like, "You guys want to do what?" And how's that interaction been between the companies?
Yeah. I mean, I think we're their only drone partner in and of itself. That being said, I don't want to talk too specifics about it, just because a lot of it is covered under NDA, but you will hear a lot more publicly about that partnership and that tie-in, in the coming months.
Roger.
Sorry to like not give you the true inside baseball, but you will eventually learn the inside baseball there. And if you give me a few drinks, maybe you'll learn more.
We'll save that for when y'all are in Texas at TexCon in October.
For sure.
We'll get Elon there on stage.
And so the good thing, we are expanding quite a bit. The funding, we just announced another funding round, and with that, we are continuing to build out our team. So why is that important is, we really feel that our mission here is to be, I always use the analogy, the easy button for DFR. So we will work with you to build out your team. We'll come out, provide the training. Our customer success team, you'll talk directly to some of our engineers if you've got any issues, if you've got some ideas. Our engineers love talking to public safety because, everybody comes up with these great ideas, and they're engineers, they like to problem shoot. So, don't feel like what you see on the market is, the limitations. The limitations is just by imagination, and the ability to get it in front of the right people. So I'd encourage you that if you do have ideas, please reach out. We'd love to talk to you about it.
Sure. And then, yeah, I mean, we'll hop into more Q&A here too, but I think also to call this out, if you ever want to see this yourself, operate it yourself, kind of reach out, schedule a demo. And then if you want to see Guardian, which is kind of our next gen bird in development, you can always kind of visit our headquarters here in Seattle, where we build and kind of prototype everything as well. So you can kind of, feel free to open offer kind of there as well.
And David, will the email links be there? Do we have those on another slide, or?
I'll drop them in here for you guys after.
Okay.
But yeah.
Okay.
I mean, my email is just david@brinkdrones.com. So feel free to email me anytime, and we'll get in touch. But I'll add it to the slide before I send the link.
Yeah, I'll also add in, for those who don't know me, my background is I worked for a state public safety agency here in Texas. And a lot of times through the procurement process, it's difficult to schedule, private demos with companies. So Drone Responders has multiple state groups. And one of the reasons we have these state groups is so that state group can host demo sessions. So if you're in Florida or Virginia, North Carolina, Oklahoma, Ohio, California, Texas, Georgia, or Alabama, reach out to your Drone Responders representatives, and we can set up some type of regional or state demonstration with BRINC, so you can get hands-on with this technology. Plus, like I mentioned, we have our Ohio conference coming up and our Texas conference coming up, where you'll be able to see this technology.
And I did see another question from Paul. Has your company seen any integration successes with having repeaters in cities to allow for further BVLOS operations, particularly in rural ones? It's a great question. It's actually something that's different about the BRINC system versus I think other products out there in the market. We do have all of our drones use mesh radios instead of just traditional radios or point-to-point radios. And so that's an inherent built-in feature of our products. It can be used in many different ways. We do use it in a DFR environment to enable BVLOS. So on all of our installs, we are relying on cellular, but we are also relying on additional mesh repeaters that we install for you as well. They don't have to be next to the station. Often we put them in a slightly better area than the station itself is installed in for your launches. So that's something that we do enable as a default for all of our customers. It does also allow you to be really flexible. Let's say if you're deploying a indoor drone and an outdoor drone from BRINC, if they're on the same mesh, they're going to be extending each other's range. So in like we kind of walk through a school setting where you have these huge concrete thick walls along the vertical axis, but they have really thin roofs. Penetrating with an indoor drone through all those thick walls, you might get through one, you might get through two, you might not get through many more. But if you're penetrating through the roof to a drone that's above and then back to that controller, you can actually extend your range quite a bit. So that's something today that can be done with just our drones working as mesh repeaters themselves, or installing additional kind of repeater in areas strategically. So that's something we do by default. I would say there's still restrictions to that. Every mesh reduces the amount of kind of signal pass through and like latency overall too. So I'm not going to say you're going to fly 100 miles away, but it does enable in a smaller area or like a smaller city, really good performance there. Cool.
So I do have a couple more questions. All other people, feel free, everybody in the chat or in the Q&A, to throw any questions, comments, suggestions you've gotten here. Going back to kind of the concept of DFR, what have you seen through the years that the biggest barriers were for agencies to get into having a DFR program? How have those barriers been overcome, and what do you really see the next range of gaps or barriers becoming?
Yeah. Don, you want to tackle that one first?
I'll take that. I think that's a wide open way of looking at it. Obviously, community acceptance is a huge part of it. It was interesting when we started building out our drones, and the engineers said, what's one of the first things that we should focus on, or what should we have? And I said, obviously, great batteries, good cameras. But I wanted lights, red and blue lights. I want markings on there. On the drone, because the community always asks, how do we know that drone that's flying around is a public safety drone and that you're not spying on us or something of that nature? So being able to show the community, walk into a community presentation with a drone that has your police department or your fire department's markings on there. We all know that at 200, 400 feet, they're not going to see the markings. We get that, but where does the media take the pictures, right? When it's there at the station or in those meetings. So just the acceptance, we're seeing a much broader community acceptance. And I also see a lot of agencies, the ones that are truly successful, really doing the groundwork ahead of time to educate their community, educate their officials, their mayor and city councils, the government, the stakeholders within the city. And when they do that, there's no surprises coming in afterwards. I think from the tech aspect of it, just the integrations, obviously getting rid of visual observers, standing on rooftops and swapping batteries and staring at skies for 10 hours a day is no longer needed. So that's huge. I think moving down, if we have a crystal ball looking down into the future there, obviously UTM is going to be a huge aspect of it. How do we integrate and how do we, coordinate our flights with these drone delivery companies? Just in our initial talks with the drone delivery companies, they just assume we flew to a set point and flew back, kind of like the way they're flying, right? They're delivering a package and they're delivering back. So they know their path, where in public safety, we know scenes move, right? You're following a vehicle or it's a foot pursuit or something like that. So just being able to have that information and to develop a long-term strategy on, public safety, getting preemption, getting the priority calls for service, and being able to all work in the same airspace. And obviously that's what Part 108 and the UTM and everything else is working on.
Yeah, I'll kind of add to that too. Which is kind of like also complimenting Don a little bit, if you guys don't know, Don started the first DFR program in America at Chula Vista PD. And, the work him and his team had to do to set that program up was, figure out the drones. The drones maybe didn't work with the docks. They didn't have like a piloting software behind them. They didn't have a evidence tie-in behind them. They didn't have a transparency dashboard. There's all this stuff that now is stapled together in kind of a one-click push that you don't have to figure out anymore. And so DFR is inherently, because of the technology and how we've kind of really integrated, either by doing it through our one software or kind of integrating with partners, turned what used to be stitching these things together with a lieutenant or a captain requiring their full time, frankly, or even multiple people's full time to just stitch those together before you're operational. It was a huge bottleneck to just DFR and how you could get up and running. And those have really been removed, I'd say, with kind of how we support you and how we enable you. You really just provide the pilots that want to get trained, and we train them, and then they get operational. So it's a very streamlined process now. In addition to also just making it a bit easier to get started, see the value of it before you kind of dial in on kind of the budgeting there too. So, we can help you guys out there as well. So there's really easy today, I'd say, to get started with DFR and get moving pretty quickly. Whereas before, it required a ton of investment, a ton of buy-in from leadership, because if they're doing DFR, it would take their whole leadership a year or two to figure it out. And that's no longer the case. It really is kind of more like hitting the easy button, going through those steps, and then focusing more on communicating about the value than it is about, being worried about, is this streaming to the right platform, and how am I logging things for the transparency dashboard and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's a great point, and that really leads me into my next question. Going back to what we were saying earlier, I'm really proud of the work the drone responders did working with the FAA to enable more or a simpler process to be able to fly beyond visual line of sight, which has enabled more DFR programs. But one thing that a lot of people have heard me say is you still have to have the fundamentals of a drone program before you just jump into doing DFR, right? And it's almost to the point where it's so easy, the technology is so simple to use that agencies are just jumping into the DFR model without having those core fundamentals. So how would y'all define the difference between a startup DFR program and a mature DFR program? And at this point in 2026, what are the lessons that you are seeing that agencies are still failing to implement that's kind of becoming a pinch point for them?
Yeah, it's a great point. Where I'm seeing a pinch point is who's going to pilot these drones, right? That's really, early on, and I'm still pretty much on this, where I'm a big proponent of pilots being sworn officers, police officers, either current or retired police officers. And I only say this not from the technical aspect, but they understand crime potential. They understand suspect behavior. They become kind of the quasi incident commander in dictating where resources are going to. Where a lot of agencies are starting to look at is, do they put these pilots locations in dispatch centers? Dispatch centers are a lot of areas that they're looking at, especially these regional ones. RTCs, real-time crime centers, is another one. And so the pain point is they don't want to take an officer out of patrol and put them as a pilot. Could an analyst do this, or could a dispatcher do this? And I would say yes, absolutely. And because of the ease, that the autonomy aspect of it is good, but the challenge becomes there's a misconception that you can, a 911 call comes in, the drone just automatically launches and automatically deploys there, and once on scene, somebody can log into the system and do that. And we know for a fact that the FAA says absolutely not. Somebody has to pilot that drone and be there. So I think the pain point is understanding what they can and cannot do with it, and how to utilize the drone for more than public safety purposes. Is gotten some agencies into some hot water, so to speak, with their communities.
Yeah, no, I think that's true. I think communication tends to be where a lot of the agencies will kind of get stuck up on. What is that relationship like with the city council? How are you communicating about the value of a police or fire department more broadly? And, sometimes it is a good way to kind of work through a relationship that might be frayed already. And sometimes it is adding into the mutual aid bucket, tying in a fire department if you're a police department, communicating about the overall value and how public safety is kind of happening and really being beneficial. Because I think once people understand the value and how this technology works, we really don't see concerns. I think it just happens when, people go with dual use technology that is being used by the military. And I think that's where we see a little bit of concern more recently in some policies and some kind of communities where there's pushback because there is a choice of a military drone provider. And I think that's something you need to be careful of. And the second is just not having that conversation before something gets signed. So I think those are the two things that really need to kind of be considered as you go through that communication process. And, we can be your partner for that as well. Don's gone to many city council meetings. I know we have a lot of our team that does too, just to explain the technology. Our goal isn't to sell them on it. It's to explain how you guys would use it. What are the safeguards that are in place and all that stuff too.
Yeah, and I think just one last comment on that, where a big transition is happening right now is fire departments really want to be a part of the DFR solution, be a part of the discussion in DFR, where we're seeing a lot of fire departments who, for whatever various reasons, they want to do their own standalone. So police department have DFR and the fire department, which I'm not a big proponent of it, but a lot of them are now working together and having a mutual DFR program, because it's drone as a first responder. It's not drone as a police department or drone as a fire department. It's a first responder drone.
It's fantastic, because that's my next question, or my last question was actually going to be, why are we not seeing more adoption of DFR by fire departments? You think it's primarily because of a funding issue? I just in my discussions with the fire departments, and my personal experience with our fire department, I don't think they saw the value at first. And I think fire departments are just now starting to see the value of responding to a traffic collision and being able to see what's happening before they even arrive on scene. Is that, is the car overturned? Is it on fire? Is the person trapped in there? And they're starting to see that. But funding is always going to be that challenge. So for police departments, I always say it's a different perspective when a drone launches from a fire department versus a police department. It just that perspective is better for the community. And especially when you're standing in front of your community and you've got your fire department counterpart there, you really show that this is a life-saving tool. This is something for the community, to better the community, as opposed to just a surveillance tool or a privacy issue. I think it's a lot more value, and the fire departments now are coming along, recognizing it. And I think as an industry, I think we're doing better at reaching out to the right people and having those discussions now.
Yeah, I'll kind of add to that too. I think some of it's also on our side. Like, I think we're now starting to prioritize a lot of integrations and like hardware that I think will enable fire adoption to be a lot more streamlined and a lot more valuable immediately. Like hazmat sensors, working on a few other kind of hardware and software integrations too, that I think will change the game. And then we are seeing, some bigger agencies kind of, get their hat in the ring, and LA City Fire is starting to work with BRINC on kind of their deployment and their kind of coverage. And I think as we see these bigger cities really see the value of it, all the use cases DFR can be used, I think we'll start to see that spread throughout the industry.
We got about 30 seconds left. We got one last question in here. How does your training for new agencies educate about the importance of and how to build an aviation safety culture? I knew this would be a question from David Bigelow. So balancing automation with the importance of risk management.
Yeah. David, do you want to talk about the training? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I can jump on that. So yeah, for any of our DFR customers, it's an in-person training for 2 days. We run through obviously the full control, but also kind of how those safety systems kind of tie in there too. We at all times require an operator to be there, able to take control, like that FAA kind of wants us to. And that's really baked in with really high level alerts that pop up as things become potentially more dangerous kind of environment. So I'd say it's really baked into the product. And then a lot of our recurring training when it happens on live ops, where we'll kind of walk through how these systems are working and how that kind of gets implemented there in and of itself. I'd say also, like, as agencies scale, there is a need to onboard some of that yourselves when it comes down to, hey, we're running a quarterly session to kind of review this, but we kind of give you a lot of tools to review how many flight hours people are putting on these systems, making sure they're current with, hey, you've flown enough to be able to still be a DFR pilot or be a drone pilot, is kind of a really big aspect of being able to maintain that safety culture, not just start at day one and then hope it continues there kind of forever and ever, if that makes sense. So yeah, and kind of the little last part, and we didn't touch on this, but all of our drones for DFR do come with parachutes. So that is also another big element there too. Even if you're not doing sustained operations over people, we think it's a really big, important aspect of safety and community safety there as well. Like if, a drone falls and does damage to property, we might have done a ton of good, we might have saved a ton of lives, but that all kind of gets thrown out the wayside when it comes down to that as well. So that kind of answers a little bit of that, but it kind of starts a little bit day one. We give you the tools to kind of maintain it forward, but as a drone program scales, it's something that you'll need to kind of bake in a bit more process there too.
Fantastic information. Well, I want to thank both of you, David and Don, for sharing your time, your expertise, and your insights with the public safety community. As a reminder, the link to today's presentation is in the chat. It will be on our YouTube channel, along with contact information for David and Don. It's right there in the chat as well. Before we sign off, don't forget Drone Responders and BRINC will be at Commercial UAV Expo in Las Vegas this September. So we invite you to join us on September 1st for the Drone Responders Public Safety Summit. Thank you again for your support of Drone Responders and what all of you do to advance public safety. Have a great day, stay safe, and we'll see you at our next Innovation Series webinar.